Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in the month of April. So I read books that were kind of all over in terms of genre. There was some murder mystery, there was some historical fiction, there was some fantasy. So basically the top three genres that I read from, I read from this month, which was really good. Overall, I really enjoyed all of the books that I read. So there were 5 books total plus 1 short story, which I think is pretty good. We did a little bit of traveling over Easter. We ended up going back home to Canada, which was nice, but usually on those weekends or whenever we go home, I don't end up reading that much. So I was still surprised that I was able to read as much as I did, even though kind of one of the weekends where I predominantly do most of my reading was kind of full. So like I said, I'm pleasantly surprised with everything that I accomplished this month. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So starting out, I first have the Keepsake by Tess Gerritsen, and this is the next installment in the Recieve Isles series. And in preparation for the new book coming out in July, I've been rereading the series, and it has been a lot of fun. If you hear a little noise, that's Tucker down here beside me. But yeah, I had read this series when I was in high school, so it's been really fun kind of looking back at these books that, you know, really meant a lot to me. I had a lot of health issues around the time that I got into this series, so it kind of provided me with a distraction, which was really good. But I think especially now reading these as an adult, I think I like these books a lot more. And it's good too because it has been so long since I've read these that it's like reading them for the first time. There's bits and pieces of little storylines that I kind of remember, but for the most part, it's like reading them for the first time, and I think as an adult I do like them more. This follows a crime that involves some sort of mummification or someone who is obsessed with archaeology. So Dr. Mara Isles is contacted by one of the museums to be a part of the unveiling of this new mummy called Madame X, who was found in the basement of this very old museum. So when she is, with the archaeologist during the CT scan, she discovers that there is something that should not be there, that is more modern day technology in terms of a bullet wound with the bullet inside. So that kind of leads to an investigation, and we get the viller. I felt like I learned so much about mummification and that type of stuff in here, because Tess Gerritsen does have, in addition to being a physician, I think she also did her undergraduate degree in anthropology. I feel like I've learned so much about archaeology and mummification, all that stuff, so it was a very interesting read, and it's so action-packed, especially the ending in here. You're just so, enticed by this story and this mystery, and something that's a little bit unique with the mummification I thought was just a lot of fun. And there's kind of a cold case integrated in here as well, which makes it a lot of fun. So overall, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I've really enjoyed this reread as well. And then kind of continuing on with my reread, I then read Ice Cold, which is the next installment in here, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. This is the one that creeped me and my sister out the most. There's one scene in particular that me and my sister distinctly remember even after all these years, and it's still creepy. This is one where I was like, I don't want to read this at nighttime because that is how creepy it is. But basically the premise of this one is that Mara is away at a conference in Wyoming, and after the conference is over, she takes a spur of the moment trip with someone that she knew during her undergraduate studies. And while they're there driving through the mountains, the truck breaks down and they end up stumbling upon this old deserted town or small little village that belonged to a cult, and it kind of leads to creepy things discovering there. But the scene I remember in particular is Mara wakes up and there's footprints in the snow of someone looking in through the windows, and that creeped me and my sister out, and I'm like, shoot, I'm on the main floor, I don't like this. So it is very spooky, but this one is again incredibly action-packed, and I was just physically at unease with this, in terms of just being really scared. And I felt that scared panic survival mode that Mara is in for most of this book, and just the integration of the two storylines of like Mara's story and then Jane's story, trying to figure out what happened to Mara, was just a lot of fun. This one was, like I said, incredibly action-packed, and anything with like religious cults really kind of freaks me out too. So it did have that kind of that aspect going with it too. But I think this one, in terms of the suspense, in terms of the action, in terms of the mystery, and kind of the thrown in survival against, you know, frigid winter mountainous terrain, made this one a lot of fun, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. And then, kind of to finish up the Brazilian Isles reread for this month, I then read the short story called Freaks, which is in between Ice Cold and then the next book, which is The Silent Girl. So I just read this one. It's very quick, like you can read it within like 20 minutes, but it's just a fun, suspenseful read. I thought it was a very unique kind of short story, I guess you could say. Like, just the murder mystery aspect of it was really kind of fun and unique and different. That would be like a good one, I feel like, to read around Halloween time, so keep that in mind. But yeah, it was just a fun, quick novella, like short story read, so I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars as well. So next we are moving on to one of my most anticipated new releases of the year, and I was so excited to finally get it in my hands, and it is The Diamond Eye by Kate Quinn. And I do have a more in-depth spoiler-free review of this that I'll link up in the cards if you want to go and check that out. But basically, this is a very loosely, I use loosely very strongly in this, loosely based account of Mila, who was a true German, like an actual real life person during World War II. She lived in Russia, and she was one of the most decorated snipers in human history, but history has seems to have forgotten her. So this follows her story of, you know, how she got her rifle training, her eventual kind of experience during the war, and then there's also this plot that takes place kind of in the future of this storyline, which this did actually happen, where she did a tour throughout the US in order to kind of get more US support on the Western Front of their war, and she ends up befriending Eleanor Roosevelt, which is very true. But there is this fictionalized story of an assassin that is trying to kill President Roosevelt, and he's trying to use, you know, Mila as, you know, the scapegoat. I did really enjoy this book. I learned a lot about like the science behind sniping, which or I guess sniping, is that the word? But I learned a lot about like that technique and how much of a kind of a science it is. Like, I would never want to be able to do it. Like, I'm very much anti-gun, but it was very interesting kind of learning about how much science goes behind it and like the calculations and everything they have to do, and just Mila's experience in the war and how being a woman was a very unique experience. Someone who also, like, you know, went through that was really interesting to kind of see from. I will say this is a little bit heavy on the romance, and the author took a lot of embellishment. Like I said, it's very, very, very loosely based off of this person, so it doesn't feel like you're actually reading like a historical account of this person. It's very much fictionalized, so just be aware. But I really like how Kate Quinn showcases a lot of the kind of untold stories of women throughout history. In particular, it's kind of reminded me of The Huntress, where we follow a Russian woman who was also part of World War II, who fought with the planes. So I read in the author's note that she kind of discovered about Mila while she was researching for that. So that was interesting to see. Like I said, if you look past how the author took a lot of liberties and embellished a lot of stuff, then I think you really will enjoy this. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I will say, like, the ending in here was super suspenseful, and for the reader it was super rewarding as well. So despite all the embellishment and it being like very, very loosely based off of this actual person, it was still a decent historical fiction read. Next up, I picked up the newest installment in the Eve Ronan series, which was Gated Prey by Lee Goldberg. This is the 3rd book, like I said, in the Eve Ronan series, and it follows Eve, who is a very new homicide detective, and she ended up gaining this position by using some internet fame to her advantage. She was recorded arresting a celebrity who was involved in some domestic violence with his girlfriend, and so she used that popularity and media attention to kind of leverage a position into the homicide department in LA. So this deals with a case where there are these series of break-ins in a very gated, wealthy community, and it is Eve and her partner's Duncan's responsibility to find out what is going on, and it kind of goes off from there. I think with these crime series it's best to not know too much, but again, this one, it does, like, Lee Goldberg I think is known for writing scripts or doing anything for like film or TV show type of writing, so this book reads like a movie or a TV show. Like, it's incredibly fast paced, you're following a bunch of different leads trying to solve this with the characters, and I think it is a lot of fun. This one, again, as always, has been really action packed, and I find that I can read this fairly quickly. I think for like the first 2 books I read them both within a day, and this one was over the span of a couple days just with school and stuff. But yeah, I think this is a really fun kind of newer crime series. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit different, kind of a newer crime series that kind of, you know, steps away from a lot of the formulaic old school 90s era crime genre novels, then I think you'll like this. And there's only 3 books out so far. I think the newest book comes out sometime in the summer, which is really exciting. So if you're looking for, you know, a new crime series to start with a very interesting main character, then I would highly recommend to check this series out. Overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a lot of fun. I liked the mystery aspect in here, and there's kind of other things kind of cycling around within this main investigation, which made it a lot of fun. So yeah, like I said, I've been loving my crime genre books recently. And lastly, this is a book that my boyfriend got me for Christmas, and I finally got around to reading it. It was mostly because of the Rosalind Isles reread that I kept having to like push it back every TBR, but I was like, I told him in the beginning of the month, I'm like, I'm finishing this book this month, I promise you. And it is Titus Grown by Mervyn Peake, and this is one of like the very classic fantasy series, I guess you can say. And I've also heard Sunbeams just talk about this trilogy as well. It's called the Gormenghast trilogy. But basically, I have heard really good things about the second book, but this book is a little slow. Overall, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I was very intrigued by the characters. I will say it's a very character-driven story. Like, there's not a lot of plot, but it's very much character driven, and if you're intrigued by characters' stories and their interactions with each other, then I think you will like this. But I feel like a good description of this is that Titus is the newest heir to Gormenghast, who throughout this book is only like a baby, like newly born to 2 years old, and like you follow the mundane lives of the people who live within Gormenghast the castle, and you follow kind of these characters throughout the 2 years of his, you know, birth, basically. And then you also follow this other character's perspective who's trying to manipulate and angle people to get in a higher position within Gormenghast. So you can see how his manipulations and everything he's trying to do manipulate the people around him to get where he wants to go. I think, like I said, I don't really know how to describe this. It says dreamlike is kind of how I would describe this, and it was very interesting. It did take me a while to get into this book because it does start out very slow, and I feel like this book could have been easily like 150 pages, but this author just kind of reminded me of Charles Dickens, where he just like writes and writes and writes so much about, it's more of an atmospheric read, like just where it would be like 3, you know, pages worth of describing the sky. Like that's kind of what it just reminded me of, and I feel like I needed a dictionary too. Like it was being like kind of over elaborative in terms of the language, that it was just a little bit annoying, but I was still very intrigued with these characters and their interaction with each other and what's happening next. Like I said, I think the second book, Gormenghast, was on Sunbeam's Just Top Books of 2021, so I do want to continue on with this trilogy. I think it is one of the, you know, core kind of modern fantasies. There's not a lot of magic in here or anything like that, but I will say it's kind of more fantastical in terms of the castle and atmosphere. So I don't think this book is for everyone, but if you want an atmospheric read and if you like kind of Charles Dickens style of writing, then I think you'll like this. But overall, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I am intrigued enough to kind of continue on with this trilogy, especially hearing so many great things about the second book. So I think I'll wait until autumn to read this, because I feel like that kind of dreary setting goes along well with this series overall. So yeah, it was something outside of my comfort zone, and I surprisingly liked it more than I was expecting. So that's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what books you read this month and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.